Hey, let's talk about hypnotism, workings of the mind, and even psychology a little bit. Um, I like to call it a few names, particular interest. James Tripp with the double P at the end. I like to throw out the name, let's see, where is he? David Snyder. Really interesting ideas with using symbolism to get through to the subconscious. Um, to blow past the critical factor, and even to make it so that the hypnotist who doesn't really necessarily need to hear all of the, as he calls it, garbage, all of the baggage of the clients can just skip straight to working with the issues without having to actually deal with them specifically. So very interesting and effective. And then of course Michael White, and many others, I'm sure. You can find all of them on YouTube. Let's talk about psychology. I've had quite a bit of exposure to their ideas with well, using medicines for the most part to regulate the brain, to I guess calm the brain, and to solve psychosis and schizophrenia and all that stuff. Um, I think a lot of those methods are quite brutal, quite indiscriminate. They don't really provide an effective way to move forward in the healing, so obviously you have to combine that with therapy, um, with counseling, and to be honest, that's really where the healing happens. And we'll talk about, and the therapy and the counseling is somewhat like hypnotism, except that they don't use those techniques. And then I oftentimes look at the medicines as being sometimes very crude ways, but definitely always, well, I guess always pretty crude ways to manage what might be a very dangerous situation. So if there's danger, if there's a lot of worry about physical safety and so forth, I can see the need of that. ECT is also especially violent in its electroshock rebooting of the brain. You're literally shocking all the brain cells and resetting it, and losing short-term memory and a lot of other things. Basically, all those neural pathways that are being connected with the electrical pathways they're being blown, right? And so all the damage that comes with that. So yeah, before you, I guess, do too much in some of those more dangerous ways, I'd encourage you to try just using the natural means. And so we'll talk about the mind in just a moment, before you start using ECT. And just as I might recommend to try more natural ways of losing weight before you go and cut your body to physically rip out the fat beneath your skin, or other kinds of surgeries, right? I'll always try the natural, nicest ways of dealing with it before you do the more violent ways when you have to. All right, so let's talk about the mind. There's two parts of it. The critical factor is like your thinking part, where you evaluate. It's very intellectual. Not a whole lot of base feelings, though there is a lot of logic in there. Subconscious, a whole lot of feelings, a whole lot of internal values, and in a way you could probably quite easily connect the values to the subconscious, and the desires to the critical factor. These are things that you want, that you're planning, you're desiring. Now sometimes that you don't always go for your desires. Sometimes you don't always follow your values, as you've seen when people sometimes violate their values in favor of the desires, or sometimes they restrain their desires in order to hold true to their values. There's sometimes a conflict there, and that conflict is what I'm about to talk to you about. Hypnosis and hypnotists making it seem as though a person is doing something against their will, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the general approach of hypnotism, but not always, is that the critical factor is the thinking part of your brain that needs to be basically put to the side. It needs to be distracted and engaged in focusing on a bright light, or focusing on oftentimes something physical, maybe moving back and forth with your eyes and so forth. And then with that out of the way, then these outside ideas from the hypnotist or these suggestions can come into the subconscious. And so to facilitate that, the hypnotist will usually, to I guess make it more effective, will ask for your consent for hypnosis, and will assure you that they're not going to do anything against your interests, basically trying to convince you to allow that critical factor to get distracted, to get off guard. It's kind of like you're telling the outside guards, hey, go take a lunch break, and let us in to the factory, right? And then you come into the factory with your outside ideas and try to persuade the subconscious now, the keeper of your internal values, to do various things. Now, if you didn't have any internal values to begin with, then it wouldn't be too hard to persuade you to do some pretty outrageous things. If your internal values were only to have a positive image with other people, you're worried about what other people think of you, then the hypnotist only has to convince you that no one's going to judge you, that you're safe, that you don't have to worry about what others think of you, things like that. And then those values are set to the side, and the hypnotist can then ask you, and again, suggestions, to do various things. It might come in the form of commands, like, do this, but it's still a suggestion. You can reject a command. I'm sure many of you have told someone to do something and not been obeyed, especially parents. So this is the case where you can see, if somebody has a desire to act out a particular thing and their values were in conflict, then those desires, even though the critical factor has been set to the side, the desires do come into effect. But they come into effect working for the hypnotist who's come in, who's bypassed the critical factor. So it's kind of reinforcing what the hypnotist is saying. Now, let's see, is it possible for the hypnotist to ask you to do something that seems against your desires, but actually along with your values? And that also is true. This is a constant war. Your desires and values are constantly battling. And if the hypnotist manages to say, I guess, empower your values, setting aside your critical factor, says let go of these desires. Maybe you have desires to smoke, right? Or you have desires to be accepted in a social group. Then those desires might be based on needs from the subconscious, but the hypnotist can persuade you that those needs can be met in other ways. That's usually the most effective way to transform these desires. So now you don't really have those desires to do these other things, because the hypnotist is connecting those current desires with bad things, and then connecting other desires with meeting meeting your subconscious needs. In the end, subconscious needs are going to win out. So these values, it's very easy to empower, if there are values, to empower these values. A little harder is for the hypnotist to change internal values. That doesn't usually happen, but the hypnotist would have to try to persuade you that you've been misled through elaborate storytelling or whatever to get you to see that one set of values are really appealing and another set of values aren't. Oftentimes I think this happens in movies, where movies might make immodesty appeal to be a good value, popular, attractive, desired, all of that from immodesty. And so movies are hypnotizing us all the time as well. And yeah, they are trying to persuade us. Doesn't mean that they'll mind control us or that they'll succeed, but they're trying. They're presenting a story, and values always go with stories. So in all this, one last thing to note is that since your subconscious does control your body, it controls your heart rate, your hormones, and that affects how all your organs work, whether they work at all. If you're talking about shock, and the subconscious might be telling the body to shut down, or whether they're working improperly, they're given the wrong hormones or too much of the wrong hormones. That's all controlled by the subconscious. The subconscious has to do with your identity, who you are, whether you identify as a male or female. The subconscious is programmed into the subconscious based on a lot of external factors, raisings, which you've been taught in the media about how we should all accept LGBTQ plus whatever. These are all things that are being programmed into our subconscious, and in ways that really is hard to understand. But yeah, it is possible for somebody to go into a trance that ignores their biological gender and believes that they're another gender, or believes that they're attracted to another sex. All of the instructions are in your DNA to be attracted to the other sex. It's just that the subconscious gets the right hormones and the right upbringing and everything to connect to the proper attraction. That's usually what happens. So improper connections in the subconscious can really mess things up. It can mess up your body, it can mess up your hormones, it can mess up what you're attracted to, and it may feel as though that's your identity. It may feel as though that's your reality. That's because these are the values, again, that have been instilled in you, either directly or indirectly, whether knowingly or unknowingly. These are the messages you're getting. So yes, you can have symptoms without having any problems with your body. It can seem like you have medical problems when there are none. Organs can not function correctly, even though they should, even though tests say that they're working fine or that they are fine. So all this has to do with, I guess, getting your critical factor to work right and accept truth, what's real. Your subconscious factor accepts your real identity and not wrong identities associated with stereotypes, which are meaningless. It cares about stereotypes and social stereotypes, social views, and you actually understand yourself. That's really all that matters is yourself and getting true to the biology and the facts and what is for you. So, all right, I hope this I not only made it easier to understand about how the mind works in hypnosis, but also I'd like to encourage you in this last few seconds to definitely reach out to others. That definitely helps a stable mind to be able to connect with others, to hear other people's different perspectives, different opinions, even opinions you don't like. Definitely talk to church leaders. Get a good religion and a good church leader, because you need it. You need a spirituality, and listen to them and hear them out and hear all the good things of it. Talk to family, hear them out and hear all the good things that can come from them. Again, do talk to counselors, do talk to psychological therapy sessions, whatever. Just be careful that about the values. If they try to give you these wrong values, that it's okay to be something you're not, take that with a grain of salt, because obviously it's not okay for me to be God, because I'm not God, and I'm not going to pretend it, and I don't care how much my mind believes it. I'm certain that I could convince my subconscious that I was God, and that my subconscious, my brain would play out these delusions so that in my own mind I had all these powers and everything. But it doesn't matter. Reality is what matters, and it's connecting with people that are grounded, that keep us from these weird psychosis of thinking things that aren't true. So anyhow, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope this is valuable. Please remember those names: James Tripp, David Snyder. Awesome people to look up on YouTube and check out their videos. Very interesting. And Michael White. And thanks for watching, and have a great day.